The taste of blood in my mouth had become as familiar as morning coffee over the past 3 years. My stepfather Derek's latest lesson about respect had left my lips split and my ribs aching. But I forced myself to move methodically through my childhood bedroom, folding clothes into the battered suitcase I'd bought with money from my secret job at the library. My name is Alex. I'm 18 and about to inherit an empire. This is the story of how I escaped hell and dragged my demons into the light. "You're pathetic," my mother Linda called from the hallway, her voice slurred with the wine that fueled most of her evening rages. 18 years old and you can't even take a simple correction without crying. No wonder your real father abandoned you. The lie but still stung, even though I'd learned the truth years ago. My biological father hadn't abandoned me. He'd died in a car accident when I was 2, leaving behind a trust fund my mother had been systematically draining for years. But what she didn't know was that my grandmother had been watching, documenting, preparing. Derek appeared in my doorway, his bulk filling the frame like a thundercloud. "You got 30 minutes to get your worthless hide out of my house, and don't think about coming back when reality hits. You made your choice, my choice." As if choosing to turn 18 and legally escape their daily torment was somehow defiant rather than survival. The fresh bruises on my arms throbbed as I lifted my suitcase, each mark a testament to the years I'd endured waiting for this moment. "Where are you even going to go?" Linda laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. "You think that minimum wage library job is going to pay for an apartment? You'll be sleeping under bridges within a week." I thought about the letter hidden in my backpack, the one from Morrison, Caldwell, and Associates that had arrived yesterday while they were out. The one that began, "Dear Mr. Henderson, we regret to inform you of your grandmother's passing, but are pleased to execute her final wishes regarding your inheritance." "I'll figure it out," I said quietly, shouldering my backpack with the letter that would change everything. Derek snorted. "Yeah, right. Kids like you don't figure out nothing. You're weak, just like your dead daddy was." That's why he couldn't handle a simple car ride without screwing it up. The cruelty in his words was designed to break me one final time before I left, but I'd moved beyond breaking. I'd spent too many nights researching inheritance law at the library, too many hours planning for this exact moment. "Goodbye, Mom," I said, meeting her bloodshot eyes. "Goodbye, Derek." Linda's expression flickered, perhaps surprised by my calm tone, the lack of tears or pleading they'd grown accustomed to extracting from me. "Don't call here," she warned. "Don't write. You're not our problem anymore." "No," I agreed, walking past them toward the front door. "I'm not your problem, but you might become mine." The door slammed behind me with a finality that should have been terrifying. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, hope mixed with anticipation. The evening air was cool against my bruised skin as I walked toward the bus stop, every step taking me further from hell and closer to the truth about my grandmother's legacy. The law office of Morrison, Caldwell, and Associates occupied an entire floor of downtown's most prestigious building. I sat in their waiting room the next morning, still wearing yesterday's clothes, but having spent the night in a cheap motel, reading and rereading the inheritance documents. "Mr. Henderson?" A distinguished woman in her 50s emerged from an office. "I'm Catherine Morrison. Thank you for coming so quickly." Her office was warm and professional, nothing like the sterile government buildings where I'd occasionally been interviewed about my home situation over the years interviews where I'd learned to lie convincingly to protect myself from even worse retaliation. "I have to admit," Ms. Morrison began, settling behind her desk, "your grandmother left very specific instructions about how to handle this inheritance. She was quite concerned about your family situation." My throat tightened. "She knew?" "Alex, your grandmother hired private investigators 3 years ago when she noticed inconsistencies in your mother's explanations about your injuries during family visits. She documented everything: medical records, school reports, photographs of bruises your mother claimed were from clumsiness." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Grandma had known and had been building a case, gathering evidence while I suffered in silence. The inheritance is substantial, Miss Morrison continued, sliding a thick folder across her desk. Henderson Enterprises is worth approximately $47 million. Your grandmother built it from a small textile business into a diversified company with real estate holdings, manufacturing contracts, and investment portfolios. $47 million. The number was so large it felt abstract, like reading about fictional wealth in a novel. There are conditions, she continued. First, you must complete high school, or obtain your GED within 2 years. Second, you must undergo counseling to address the trauma you've experienced. Third, you must wait until age 21 to access the principal, but the trust provides you with substantial living allowances and educational funding immediately. I stared at the documents, watching legal language transform my desperate circumstances into something resembling hope. What kind of living allowances? $50,000 per year, plus educational expenses, housing costs, and medical care. Essentially, everything you need to build a stable, independent life. The amount was more than Derek made at his construction job, more than Linda had ever earned in her sporadic employment. It was freedom spelled out in legal terminology and trust fund provisions. But here's where it gets interesting. Ms. Morrison's tone shifted, becoming almost conspiratorial. Your grandmother discovered that your mother and stepfather have been committing financial fraud using your identity. Credit cards, loans, even a second mortgage on their house, all using your social security number and forged signatures. My hands clenched involuntarily. Of course they had. The mysterious bills that arrived with my name, the calls from debt collectors that Derek always handled, the way they'd grown more desperate and violent over the past year. The total fraudulent debt is approximately $200,000, she continued. Your grandmother's investigators documented everything. We can have them arrested and prosecuted, or ... double quotes, she paused meaningfully. Or what? Or we can give them a choice. They can sign over their house deed to satisfy the fraudulent debt, accept prosecution for identity theft, or negotiate a settlement that keeps them out of prison but strips them of most assets. The power I've never possessed suddenly sat heavy in my hands. These people who had broken my bones and crushed my spirit were now at my mercy. What did my grandmother recommend? Miss Morrison smiled grimly. She left a letter for you. Her exact words were, "Let Alex decide how much mercy they deserve." That evening, I sat in my new studio apartment, clean, safe, and entirely mind-reading Grandma's final letter. Her handwriting was familiar from birthday cards and Christmas notes, but her words carried weight I'd never heard before. My dearest Alex, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you're finally free. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you sooner, but I needed legal proof of what they were doing before I could act. You have suffered more than any child should, but you survived with your compassion intact. That makes you stronger than they will ever be. She continued, "The money is just money, sweetheart. What matters is that you now have choices they stole from you. You can choose revenge or mercy, justice or forgiveness. Choose what helps you heal, not what feeds your anger." The next morning, I called Miss Morrison and made my decision. I want them prosecuted for the identity theft and fraud. I said clearly, but I also want to offer them a settlement that allows them to avoid prison if they meet certain conditions. What conditions? Derek attends anger management counseling for 2 years. Linda goes to rehabilitation for her alcoholism. They surrender the house to pay the fraudulent debt, but I'll provide them with a small rental property, one of my inherited holdings, where they can live affordably while they work on themselves. Ms. Morrison was quiet for a moment. That's unexpectedly generous, Alex. It's not generous, I corrected. It's strategic. If they get help, maybe they'll stop hurting people. If they refuse help, they go to prison. Either way, they can't hurt me anymore. The confrontation happened in Miss Morrison's conference room. Derek and Linda arrived thinking they were meeting with creditors about their mounting debt. Instead, they found me sitting calmly at a polished table, flanked by lawyers and holding documentation of their crimes. "What is this?" Linda's voice cracked as she recognized me. "Alex, what are you doing here?" "I'm here to discuss your future," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Or rather, your lack of one if you refuse my offer." Derek's face cycled through confusion, anger, and dawning fear as Miss Morrison laid out the evidence of their fraud. Bank records, forged signatures, credit applications, years of financial abuse documented in excruciating detail. "You can't prove we meant to," Derek started. "We can prove everything," I interrupted. "The question is whether you want to face criminal charges or accept my settlement offer." Linda was crying now, ugly sobs that might have moved me a year ago. "Alex, baby, we were desperate. The bills, the mortgage, we were trying to keep the family together. By stealing my identity and beating me unconscious?" I asked quietly. "That's an interesting definition of family." The settlement terms were simple. They would surrender their house, enter mandatory counseling, and live in the small rental property I would provide. In exchange, I wouldn't press criminal charges. They had 24 hours to decide ... And if we refuse? Derek's voice had lost all its bluster. "Then you'll discover what it feels like to be powerless and afraid," I replied. "Just like you taught me." They took the settlement. Within a month, they were living in a modest duplex across town, attending court-ordered therapy sessions, and working minimum-wage jobs to cover their basic expenses. Derek's construction company dropped him when his background check revealed the fraud charges. Linda lost her part-time retail job when her drinking caused too many missed shifts. Meanwhile, I enrolled in community college, started seeing a trauma counselor, and slowly began building a life I'd never imagined possible. The inherited business required minimal oversight. Grandma had chosen excellent managers, allowing me to focus on education and healing. 6 months later, Derek called me. His voice was different, smaller, uncertain. "Alex, The counselor says I should call you. To apologize." I let the silence stretch between us. "I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything," he continued. "But I need you to know. I was wrong. About everything. The way I treated you, the things I said. You didn't deserve any of it." "No," I agreed. "I didn't. Are you? Are you doing okay? With school and everything?" I looked around my apartment bookshelves full of textbooks, a desk where I studied without fear of interruption, walls that had never echoed with screams or breaking glass. "I'm doing better than okay," I said. "I'm doing exactly what I was meant to do." "Good," he whispered. That's good." After I hung up, I realized something had shifted inside me. The rage I'd carried for so long was transforming into something else, not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of peace that came from knowing I'd chosen healing over revenge, justice over cruelty. Linda never called to apologize, but her sister mentioned that she'd been sober for 4 months and was working at a women's shelter, helping other abuse survivors. Perhaps facing the consequences of her actions had forced her to confront the person she'd become. As for me, I graduated community college with honors and transferred to a 4-year university to study social work. My inheritance gave me the freedom to choose meaningful work over profitable work, to help other kids like I'd been rather than simply accumulating wealth. On my 21st birthday, I gained full access to the trust fund and immediately established a foundation for abuse survivors. The irony wasn't lost on me. Money that came from the same family system that had nearly destroyed me was now helping other young people escape similar situations. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd chosen pure revenge over measured justice. I could have destroyed them completely, left them homeless and hopeless the way they'd tried to leave me. But Grandma was right. What helps you heal isn't always what feeds your anger. The best revenge against people who tried to break you isn't becoming like them. It's becoming everything they said you could never be, and then using that success to help others they'll never reach. It's proving that their cruelty created strength, not weakness, and that their worst efforts to diminish you only made you more determined to shine.